The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have selected interior offensive lineman Graham Barton in the first round. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this live episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Credentialed member of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show, become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, plus one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to become an insider today. Lots of conversations with the insiders while the NFL draft was going on. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We will be talking about where Graham Barton fits in with this football team and some day two targets coming up in a little bit. But let's start it off. There's no more guessing. There's no more speculating. There's no more mocking. It's all done. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers selected interior offensive lineman Graham Barton out of Duke at pick 26. So with a wild start to the NFL draft where we saw 14 offensive players taken in the first 14 picks, there was some hope that one of those top edge rushers was going to fall to Tampa. Instead, all three of those top edge rushers plus Chop Robinson all went by pick 21. That left the Bucs with quite a few options. As I was saying on Twitter and I was texting with the insiders, when the Bucs were on the clock, my top choices for the Bucs were Jerzon Newton, Graham Barton, Jackson Powers-Johnson, Nate Wiggins, and Kool-Aid McKinstry. For the Bucs, the choice was easy. A plug and play, locked and loaded starting offensive lineman, and they took Graham Barton out of Duke. Now, I have talked a lot about Barton on this show, but he was the obvious choice given how the board fell and what the Bucs needed most. I was concerned about the Dallas Cowboys sitting there at 24, that they were going to take Graham Barton. Again, I texted it out to the insiders, and I said, if Barton is going to go before the Buccaneers pick, it will be here to the Dallas Cowboys. But then they traded out of that pick with the Detroit Lions. The Lions wanted to scoop up Terrion Arnold, the Alabama corner who kept sliding down the boards. And then boom, Graham Barton was there for the taking for the Buccaneers. Barton is a mauler. He has freakishly strong hands. He gets to the second level quickly in the run game. The question is, when they made the pick, was he going to play at center or at guard? Now, a lot of the talking heads were saying to put him at center, but it'll be interesting to see what the Bucs decide to do or how they view him. More on that in just a little bit. But obviously, this is the first offensive lineman that they have taken in the first round since Tristan Wirfs. But Barton was the consensus top interior offensive lineman in the class, and the Bucs were able to snag him without moving. That's the other important thing. They might have been able to trade back a few spots, maybe with Buffalo, who ended up trading back with the Kansas City Chiefs. But they would have had to stay in front of Dallas to be able to pull off this pick. Our lads, Pro Football Focus, Pro Football Network, all had Graham Barton as the top interior offensive lineman in this draft class. And our lads said, quote, bendability and pass protection is outstanding. Good footwork post-snap with attention to detail, gets himself in the right spot to gain initial advantage, plays low to the ground with accurate hands, able to keep full foot planted into the ground, showing the necessary lower joint flexibility, knows how to switch up his approach, will play fast up to the second level, and brings power on the move, end quote. Now, he lettered all 4 years at Duke University, started 39 games, played in 40 games over the course of his 4 years. He was a two-time All-American, a two-time first team All-ACC, two-time Offensive Lineman of the Year. Barton gave up just 4 total sacks over the last 2 years and allowed fewer than 10 hurries in each of the last 2 seasons. I'm going to be going through a deep dive into Barton's film over the coming days so that I can give you my honest assessment as to what I see out of him and how that will translate, because he played left tackle at Duke. I'm going to see how that will translate over to the center or the guard position and let you know exactly what kind of player the Buccaneers just got. But you have Charles Davis on NFL Network saying that he is a Pro Bowl caliber talent at the center position. That should give you some confidence. I think ultimately this was a phenomenal pick for the Buccaneers to upgrade a much needed weak position for this football team. As far as Barton's RAS, or his raw athletic score, this is another interesting insight. So the RAS did 2 different scores for Barton, one as a center and one as a guard. He was a 10 out of a possible 10 for center, which ranks him number 1 out of 619 centers drafted since 1987. At guard, he rated a 9.99, which was 3rd out of a possible 1,532 guards drafted since 1987. To say that the Buccaneers got an athletic freak would be the understatement of the first round of the NFL draft. I want to jump in to the chat real quick. We got Mike in the chat, says offensive line just got a lot better. That it did. Again, you guys know how I felt about Jerzon Newton. I thought he would have been a great addition to the defensive line on the other side of Vita Vea. Graham Barton was the smart choice, the sure choice for the Buccaneers at 26. You know, it helps the offensive line out so much. I'm going to get into more of that in just a minute. I do see Fausto in the chat says, does Newton slide to us in the second? I will get to some of the prospects to keep an eye on for day 2 for the Buccaneers. I don't think Newton is going to fall that far. I'm guessing he's going to be one of the first 10 picks. Excuse me. One of the first 10 picks of day 2. And then Fausto also in the chat says he's going to be a center. Frank G, I apologize, I missed you. He said, is he going to play left guard or center? I am going to get into what Jason Light said about Graham Barton, how Graham Barton views himself, and how the Buccaneers view Graham Barton coming up in just a little bit. So, what does this move mean for the Buccaneers? That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions making the process even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode of your favorite Locked On podcast is brought to you by the best meal kit service in the game, Home Chef. No more having to answer the dreaded question, what are we going to do for dinner tonight? Thanks to Home Chef and their chef-designed recipes that are delivered directly to my door, all pre-packaged, pre-portioned. They even peel the garlic cloves for you. And each recipe, one of my favorites, blackened mahi-mahi, comes with a full page of easy-to-read instructions that include customization options and pictures to guide you along the way through the step-by-step process so you don't have to ask, is that what chard looks like? I cannot recommend Home Chef enough, especially right now, because for a limited time, Home Chef is giving Locked On listeners 18 free meals, free dessert for life, and of course, free shipping on your first box if you head to homechef.com/lockedon today. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. Yes, you heard that right. Homechef.com/lockedon. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert.
Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener review every single day. Everydayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. I will go live again after day 2 of the NFL draft to talk about what the Bucs were able to do in rounds 2 and 3. In the meantime, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So what is Barton going to do for the Buccaneers? He immediately upgrades an offensive line that struggled mightily last season, both in run blocking and pass protection. For those of you on Twitter, you might have seen Rachaad White tweet out after the pick just a big smiling emoji face. He is excited about this pick. Baker Mayfield was running for his life last year, and because of his own abilities, he avoided a lot of sacks that should have been and was able to extend plays. But now the Bucs will look to Barton to anchor a line where they need to improve in both facets. Jason Light told the media after the pick, quote, excuse me, my goodness, quote, we had him at center, but he can play guard. Pretty damn good job at tackle too. So there's versatility there with him. We had him targeted, honestly, the whole time, and we were crossing our fingers that he would make it to us, and he did, so that's good. He's got a tenacious playing style that we like. He's a very good athlete, good technician, played center his freshman year, the COVID year, when there was an injury, and they threw him in there without any practice or training camp at center, and then just threw him in there. Then kicked him out to left tackle because he's the best athlete on the team, which typically happens in college. But we like that. Reminds me a little bit of Ali Marpet. Got some Ryan Jensen in him, which is a very good thing too. And the personality of Tristan Wirfs. So got some pretty good lab work there. End quote. Barton had the opportunity to speak with Tampa media via Zoom, and he started speaking about switching to center or guard and said, quote, I think part of this whole process has been my positional flexibility. Center, guard, probably where I'm going to be originally, then see where I best fit, where they need me the most, and what works best for me. I've been working on it all spring, been snapping for the last couple of months, feel pretty good, feel confident, ready to get in. Obviously, still have a lot of areas to improve in. I always will, but just continue to chase those improvements and mature as a football player and continue to grow my game. Those are all things I'm looking forward to doing in Tampa Bay. I just think I can play anywhere and looking forward to finding out with them where I best fit and where I can best help the team. End quote. This sounds like a guy to me that knew that no matter what team took him, he was going to get moved from left tackle to interior offensive line, and most likely to the center position. And the fact that he's already been working on his snapping shows his dedication to his craft and that he wants to be ready no matter where he gets put. I'm not saying he's 100% locked and loaded at center, but he's 100% locked and loaded along the front five. It'll be interesting now to see what the Bucs do with Hainsey. I do think it's far more likely than not that Graham Barton is your starting center for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers next season. But what are they going to do with Robert Hainsey? Are they going to move him back to guard, which is something that I've mentioned a lot of times on this show and I think is the best option for the Buccaneers? Or are they going to leave him on the bench essentially as the backup center and then roll with either Opeta or Bredesen at guard? So I think if you are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if you're Jason Light, if you are Todd Bowles, and you're taking a look at what guys you have at the offensive line positions, you want your best 5 athletes out there on the field. Wirfs is locked and loaded. Gedeke is locked in. Malk is locked in. The question is, what are you doing at center and what are you doing at guard? Robert Hainsey is the best option for this team. If they roll with Barton at center, Hainsey's the best option at left guard. Again, I've said it time and time on this show. That is where Hainsey excelled at Notre Dame. Offensive lineman university in South Bend, Indiana. He was an elite guard. The Bucs viewed him as a center, trained him up at center to back up Ryan Jensen. Then he was thrust into that starting role in 2022. And I was talking to one of the insiders via text message, that he played pretty well at center in 2022 and then took a gigantic step backwards last year. A lot of that had to do with the guard play on either side of him. Cody Malk was fine, but he went through some of his rookie struggles and had some issues. And then on the left side of Hainsey, you just had disaster all year. Matt Filer, Aaron Stinney, both of them were bad last year. But Graham Barton seems to be your starting center for next year. Robert Hainsey moving back to guard, you could see an elevation in his play that you have not seen at the NFL level yet because he was moved over to that center position. That is probably what's going to be best for the Bucs, and a lot of that will hinge on what happens on day 2, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But why would you put a lesser football player, not just a lesser guard, a lesser football player and a lesser athlete in at a starting position when you have the opportunity to have Robert Hainsey there on the left side? So now you're looking at, from left to right, Tristan Wirfs, Robert Hainsey, Graham Barton, Cody Malk, Luke Gedeke. That's a pretty darn good offensive line. But you need those guys to protect Baker Mayfield, to open running lanes for Rachaad White, Chase Edmonds, and of course, the Bucs could still draft another guard in the second or third round, and then you're looking at potentially 2 new starting offensive linemen. Then you have Robert Hainsey as your center. In the backup, you have Bredesen and Opeta that can back up the guard positions. They can move around to a couple of different spots on the line, but I think I'm sitting at about 99%. That Barton, given what Jason Light said, given what Graham Barton said, you're at about 99% that Barton is your starting center this coming season. Zach says, imagine if we trade up for Jackson Powers Johnson in the second round. I don't see that happening. I really don't. If they're going to draft another offensive lineman, I think it's going to be a pure guard. And somebody, and I've talked about Jason Light wanting the versatility in their offensive lineman, but they're going to draft somebody that would slide in and guard. I don't think they're going to draft another center. Zach Frazier was another player that I mentioned. Could be a day 2 option for them along the offensive line, depending on what they did in the first round. I don't see JPJ. I don't see Zach Frazier. I don't see those guys being targets for the Buccaneers anymore. We got Brian in the chat says, I made the live. Let's go. I appreciate all of you staying awake with me. it's pretty late. We're after 1 o'clock in the morning here, but you guys are excited about the Buccaneers first round pick. I'm excited about the Buccaneers first round pick, but where could the Bucs go in the second and third rounds? That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is just not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win, and then you dig deep, you lift your head up, and you say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right, the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly that you love, but on your phone anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There is so much to do, like playing on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. You can make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball and charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb that leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store and Google Play. Wrapping things up here on a live post first round edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And I see some of you already asking in the chat. Zach, I see you in there. Says, who do we go for in the second round? And then follow that up by saying, like, what position group? I got you covered, Zach. I got you covered. I think what you're looking at in round 2 is trying to snag one of those next tier edge rushers. So there are a few edge rushers that jump out as potential day 2 options for the Bucs. And I've kind of mixed together the second and third round edge rushers, but there are guys that can come in and be impact players for the Buccaneers this upcoming season. I have talked on this show about Marshawn Nealon and Jonah Ellis. I think those are your top 2 second round choices there at edge rusher. But you have Alabama's Chris Braswell. You have Clemson's Xavier Thomas. You have Penn State's Adiza Isaac. You have Kansas' Austin Booker. Washington's Braylon Trice, which some of you may remember I talked about on Monday because someone mocked him to the Buccaneers in the first round. So these are all really solid options. They would come in. I don't know if any of them are going to have, major instant impact the way a Leatu Latu or a Jared Verse or a Dallas Turner would have, but there's a reason those guys went in the first round, right? But right now the Buccaneers are looking at the ability to bring in one of these guys. You have Randy Gregory, you have Yaya Diaby, you have Anthony Nelson, you have Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. You're looking at big, strong, fast, athletic edge rushers that you can use in a rotation, bring them along, and allow them to kind of emerge. But these are some really solid football players that I think the Buccaneers are going to focus on and have them come in to contribute towards the pass rush. But beyond edge rusher, you had Kool-Aid McKinstry, you had Jerzon Newton, you had Cooper DeJean, you had some guys that were mocked in the first round, some of them as early as the teens in the first round that have fallen to day 2. I think those guys are likely to go early in the second round. I don't see the Bucs making a big move and trading up for one of those guys, but you never know. They have some picks that they can play with a little bit. But a couple of other guys to keep eyes on. Wide receivers Adonai Mitchell and Troy Franklin. You have cornerback Mike Sainristil, wide receiver Keon Coleman, tight end Jatavion Sanders, defensive lineman Braden Fisk, cornerback Enos Rakestraw. If you remember early in the draft process, there were a lot of people mocking Rakestraw to the Bucs at 26. And then cornerback TJ Tampa, who Evan talked about on yesterday's show. Those guys are all in play in the second round. And then with 2 picks in the 3rd round, you could have your choice of pretty much any running back. I'm sure Jonathan Brooks out of Texas and probably Michigan's Blake Corum are going to be gone by pick 89. But then you could be seeing the Bucs take Ray Davis out of Kentucky. You have Jalen, and his last name escapes me, out of Tennessee. Still have Audric Estime, who may even fall all the way to day 3, but you guys know how much I love Audric Estime. But Ray Davis, I think, is the big one to keep your eye on because of his connection with Liam Cohen. And then beyond that, I know a lot of you love wide receiver Johnny Wilson. He is still very much in play. Cornerback Kyrie Jackson is a really interesting name to keep your eye on because I've talked about the prototypical Todd Bowles corner. He likes those big, athletic, long corners. Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon, 6'3". That is a big dude. He is quick. He is fast. An interesting name. If they don't go corner in round 2, remember Kyrie Jackson's name when round 3 rolls around. Then you still have linebacker Jeremiah Trotter Jr. That fills a need. Defensive lineman Michael Hall Jr. I mentioned him on my Best of the Rest episode for a defensive lineman. He's out of Ohio State. Could really come in and boost that front line along with in a rotation probably with Logan Hall. North Carolina wide receiver Devontae Walker, safety Kalen Bullock, cornerback Max Melton out of Rutgers. And the reason I mentioned that he's out of Rutgers is that means that Todd Bowles got kind of a up close and personal look at Melton, with his son being at Rutgers. So that's a connection that you might have there. But there are still some really, really good football players out there for the Buccaneers to be able to take in rounds 2 and 3. We're talking about the Bucs still being able to get at least one. Maybe I apologize for that. My dog decided to just now wake up and shake and make a bunch of noise. You're looking at least one, potentially 2 starters still out there for the Buccaneers, and then probably a rotational player depending on the position. But the Bucs are still going to get some major impact players during Friday night of the NFL draft. Going to jump in the chat again real quick. Al Bundy says, I bet we get Ray Davis. I would prefer we didn't get him, though. I like Ray Davis. I know there are some people that are concerned about the age. But I think Ray Davis is a solid addition for the Buccaneers, honestly. And again, you're looking at him in the scope of a rotational guy. He's not taking Rachaad White's job, at least not this season and not next season. But you also look at it from the scope of how NFL teams view running backs. So when I look at running back prospects, and maybe age isn't the thing that bothers you, Al Bundy, but the way I view running backs is one contract. Wherever you draft him, if it's the 1st round, if it's the 2nd round, if it's the 7th round, one contract. Because the way the NFL works now is most of these running backs do not get second deals. So if you're bringing Ray Davis in, you have him for 4 years. And then after that, the Bucs are probably moving on. They've probably drafted at least 1, maybe 2 running backs by the time Davis gets to the 4th year of that rookie deal, because you got Rachaad White has 2 years left on his deal. Chase Edmonds is on a 1-year deal. You could be right back in the same situation before you know it. So I wouldn't worry about the age. I would worry about what's the production that you can get out of the next 4 years, because NFL teams view running backs as disposable commodities. It's not the NFL that you or I grew up watching when it was Emmitt Smith and Barry Sanders and LaDainian Tomlinson and offenses ran through the running back. Now running backs, you draft them, you have them for their rookie deal, and unless they're really, really, really special, they generally don't get that second deal. And if they do, most teams end up regretting it. You see the Derrick Henry deal, the Ezekiel Elliott deal, things like that. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about the age. I would worry about what does Ray Davis bring to the Buccaneers that they don't already have, and can Liam Cohen get him to replicate that success that he had at Kentucky last year with the Buccaneers. So if the Bucs draft Ray Davis, I think it would be a great move. He's not my top choice, but I certainly would be excited about what he brings to the team. Fausto in the chat says, corner looks like the obvious second-round target unless they go all right at the top of the second. I think the Buccaneers are going to let this thing play out just like the first round. That first round was crazy. The fact that there wasn't a defensive player taken until pick 15, and of course, it had to be Laiatu Latu. And I even texted my Colts-loving boss and said, the Colts took Latu, who I have been pounding the table on the Locked On Bucs podcast for the Bucs to take. So I'm not coming into work tomorrow. Sorry about your luck. I'm still going into work here in like 2.5 hours, but figured I'd get him on edge a little bit. Finally, in the chat, we have Brennan saying this is going to be a good season. You would hope so. You know who it's not going to be a good season for is the Atlanta Falcons, who decided to take Michael Penix Jr. with the number 8 pick without telling the quarterback that they just gave $180 gajillion to this offseason. That's hilarious. Find someone who loves you the way Raheem Morris loves reaching for quarterbacks in his first draft as a franchise head coach. He did it with Freeman. He did it with Penix. That was hilarious. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. Remember, I'm going live again Friday night after rounds 2 and 3. So make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube. You have those notifications turned on, and make sure that you are becoming a Locked On Bucs insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. I will be doing plenty of conversing with all of the insiders, and I will let all of the insiders know as soon as I am going to go live, as I do every time. In the meantime, check out all of our draft coverage over at BucsNation.com. Follow on Twitter at LockedOnBucs, at JYarcho_Bucs. And yeah, that's pretty much going to do it. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.